You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 75 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me is my podcast partner in crime. She's got the biggest brains in Georgia.
That's...
You like that?
I don't know.
I was going to say men want her, women want to be her, and local governments fear her. Jessica Szilagyi.
Hey, Dave.
How was your week?
It's been good. I think it's been better than your week. How was your week?
Well, I had a heart cath last week, which everything was fine. But for those who haven't had one, you go in, and in my case, it's 7:45 in the morning, and I get there, and they strip me down to my bare ass. Which, you know, I'm being told, we're going through your wrist. We go through your wrist. We go through your wrist. And I'm thinking, why do you have to take my britches off? And of course, they give me a gown, and in the hospital, there's only two size gowns. There's the regular size, which it's a little tight on me. You know, I'm not like seatbelt extender fat on the airplane. I'm just like, you know, a little beyond dad bod fat. So it fit, or you get the sumo wrestling one that's for like my 600-pound life. So my ass is sort of hanging out of this thing. And then one of the nurses comes in and she says, well, I've got to shave you. I said, okay. And she shaves my wrist because now I need to shave your groin. Huh? Well, if we can't get there through the wrist, we got to go through your groin. She goes, but I'll leave you covered for modesty. I'm like, well, one, if you guys had told me that, I'd taken care of it for you. I mean, I know I got a little Don Johnson going on down there, but I'd have taken care of it. Plus, if I knew it was going to be on display, I'd have gone ahead and trimmed everything up for you. So she says, I'm going to leave you covered for modesty. Then she completely uncovers me and then puts the gown back over part. And then takes clippers to me. So they start, when it's my turn, they wheel the bed halfway into the cath room. And they ask, can you walk? Yeah, I walked in here. So, okay, well, I'm going to let you walk in and get on the table. So I get up off the bed, bare ass hanging out of the gown, and there's the husband of one of the county commissioners who works as a maintenance guy there. Like, hi. And so I get in the room, and they go, we're going to leave you covered for modesty. So they completely uncover me. And I'm like, you know, if I knew this was going to happen, I'd at least fluffed it up for you guys. You know, that's a little embarrassing because I'm already scared. You know, here you go, just so I'm not already, my machismo's kind of already down anyway, and now you've got Mr. Happy completely exposed, and they put a towel over him. I'm like, and then tape my arm down and say, oh, that's for your modesty. Oh, thanks. Got 6 people around me laying on a bed, whipping Mr. Happy out. I'm like, you know, when this happens in the dream, it's totally different.
Well, so, I'm glad that it went well and there was nothing negative to report.
Yeah, so moral of the story is make sure you're clean and trimmed if you're going for a heart cath. Even if they say they're going through your wrist, they go ahead and prepare both areas. So yeah, but the good news is everything's clear, no blockages. We only did it because one of the tests was inconclusive, and I'd much rather have that done than guess. So everything's good. He was happy. The doctor was happy, impressed with himself, of course. but everything's good.
Well, that's what's most important, and I think you've taught everyone a valuable lesson.
Personal grooming.
But none of them were anticipating this week.
No, I was expecting to hear that story this week. So, Erica Thomas steps in it last week. She is 9 months pregnant. She was at a Publix in Cobb County. And she has more than 10 items. And somebody behind her says something, and I think he called her a B. You know, lazy, and said, you know, this is 10 items or less. He's standing behind her. You're lazy. And this is where stories start kind of, their two stories don't jive. She claims that he yells at her, "Go back where you came from." And the guy admits to calling her a name, but says, "I never told her to go back where you come from."
So when the story first came out, because I didn't. She did a Facebook Live where she was all in tears, crying on the camera, talking about what happened, and I didn't see that, and I still haven't watched it. I mean, I saw a couple seconds of it, but I'm not into that kind of stuff. But when I saw that it made headlines, I'm like, ugh, why? Like, this stuff happens all the time. I had somebody yell at me because of the size of my SUV, and I made a snarky comment back to them, and I got in my car and I drove away. I don't understand why the cops were called, and I don't understand why it was newsworthy. I think it's newsworthy now because she called the cops, filed a police report, and witnesses, and now they've released the surveillance video, and it does not seem to corroborate what she said. And she said she was in fear for her life, and she's held press conferences, and her attorney said that, her daughter was in the presence of it all, which I don't recall seeing her daughter in the surveillance video, but that's neither here nor there. But, talking about cruelty to children because it was in the presence of the child, and this is the worst thing you can call a woman or a black woman. And I'm thinking, no, it's not the worst thing you can call a woman. And second, don't ever ask us to promote you to higher office, Erica Thomas, because if you're this weak-minded and sensitive, you don't really have any business being in elected office.
Now, I'm going to give her a pass on the emotions thing because she's 9 months pregnant, and I know hormones are crazy drugs. But it doesn't change your hearing. And, I think the surveillance video shows that the entire altercation happened over 45 seconds. Something like that. And it took days of investigation, and the Cobb County PD had to actually come out and say they were not going to file charges.
And I'm with you on the emotions thing. I would have given her a pass had the next day or, before she really dug her feet in and doubled down. If she would have said, you know what, I totally overreacted and my hormones are wild and this, that, and the other, I would have given her a pass and said it was a stupid thing to do, but at least she owned up to it. I'm unwilling to give her a pass for the hormones when we're a week out from this now, and she's still claiming the victim status.
The calling the police is, you can't just tell somebody up yours. I mean, and the fact that she thought there was a crime committed.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the point. Even if he had said all the things she claimed, that's not illegal.
Particularly since she's elected. He didn't know who she was. Of course, she accused him of being, a Trump supporter.
Right, which was entertaining.
Turns out he's a Democrat of Cuban descent. So, yeah. I mean, I think he even opened up his Facebook page to the press like, look, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not a MAGA guy. Which doesn't make anything right or wrong based on who you support in national politics. It's just she decided that, based on the way he looked, she assigned him being a white Republican who's there to oppress her, or that she can make hay out of the idea that she's going to be oppressed by this white, obviously Republican.
Well, I don't think she ever anticipated, because she had a quasi organized semi whatever what it was in the parking lot of the Publix, I think the following day after the alleged incident occurred. And I don't think she was anticipating this man showing back up to speak for himself. I think she thought this was going to be one of those where, they never heard from the guy again, really, and she was just in the clear with her story.
She was going to put on her victim armor and and just wave her hand and all the slings and arrows would go away.
But it is definitely, I mean, supposedly she's been fundraising off of this and sending out I Stand With Erica emails and things like that because she apparently blew through like $13,000 in campaign donations in the last cycle, and it's not even an election year. So supposedly, and I'm not saying that's why she did all of this, but she's definitely campaigned off and fundraised off of this. But the thing that stinks about it is that, you know, for most of us who were wondering why this became a story at all, we can see the writing on the wall, and we follow the story. Even if we're not reading every article, we follow the timeline enough to understand that the record's been set straight. There are plenty of people out there who think this poor woman was accosted at the grocery store with her huge 9-month pregnant belly with her Planned Parenthood t-shirt on, and, you know, just with her child, trying to teach her child how to use a debit card, which is what she said she was trying to do when all this happened. And they'll never know. They'll just think that people are walking around throwing race and politics into everything.
No, he was angry at her for a good reason.
Yeah, we all hate that person. Same reason we hate, you know, a lot of things. It's annoying.
Like I've been called over with 15 items to the 10 items. I'm like, are you sure?
Exactly.
They're like, we don't throw you in jail for it. Come on. There's nobody here. Come on. And then someone come behind me like 2 as I'm halfway through it. I'm like, now I'm that guy. But no, everybody hates that person. Everybody hates the guy who refuses at the drive-thru when they say, hey, it's going to take a minute on whatever. Can you pull up? And they say, no. I'm going to sit here and everybody's going to sit and wait behind me. Yeah, everybody hates the narcissist. But she decided to make herself a victim out of it. So I think we agree. She's an awful person. And the best thing she could do for that child is give it up for adoption.
After she's deported.
After she's deported. Yes, absolutely. Send her back where she came from. Smyrna? I think it's Mableton. Same area. So both Georgia Power and Atlanta Gas Light request fee increases from the Georgia Public Service Commission. The request would add about $2.2 billion to Georgia Power over 3 years. Eventually, the total fee increase, this is not a rate, this is the fee, will add $16.48 to customers' monthly fee once fully in effect. I think it would start in January if approved.
I'm no longer a Georgia Power customer. I have an EMC down here, but I'm not that far from Plant Vogel, and a lot of people work at different... A lot of people in my area work at Vogel and then at Hatch, which is south of me. And the people who work there, the contractors, the people paying the bills, everybody is ticked about how much money and time has been spent on these nuclear expansion projects and the upkeep and what they're doing. And what doesn't make sense to me is that Georgia Power was ordered to give credits to customers this year. I think they had to roll out like a series of 3 or 4 credits on bills because of something that happened with how they were billing people and the fees that they'd already charged. And so it's, 1, something doesn't make sense. And 2, when is enough going to be enough? I understand the whole problem with our energy and the way that it's set up is that the government is involved at all. Like the fact that the Georgia Public Service Commission oversees this is something I have a huge problem with anyway. But so it's not like you can just say, well, they're a private company. They can do whatever they want. No, our state is giving them this monopolized power.
Right. And even though you're an EMC, they don't generate their own power.
Sure.
So your prices are going to go up too.
Well, absolutely. I'm just saying I don't deal with Georgia Power.
Directly.
Right.
You know, this is a combination of things that's going on. First off, we've been pushing energy efficiency. Our light bulbs are now LED, which sip power, and we don't have incandescent bulbs anymore. My wheelhouse, your air conditioner went from being 8 SEER, and that's seasonal efficiency, and the higher you get, the better, to 10 about 20 years ago, to 13, and now it's 14 SEER. The fan motor in your furnace has gone from being an on-off fan, which draws more power to start back up, to a constant torque motor, which is more efficient, uses less power. So, and we've been pushing solar. There's even a solar-powered air conditioning system that never pays for itself, super expensive. But if you just want to be that guy in your neighborhood to prove how green you are, and used to be you could sell power back to the grid if you had solar panels. So they're not able to get the money from us on consumption anymore as much. Then we've got a 3.5% unemployment rate with salaries going up. So everybody who's working on Plant Vogtle, and by the way, this increase does not include what's going to happen in 2022 when Vogtle is finished. There's supposed to be another price increase for that. This is to deal with, and something that you've done a little research on is the coal ash, is their rising cost of doing business. So everything we do has a consequence. Well, when we push for more energy efficient cars, what does government do? They raise the tax on gasoline because they're not selling as many gallons. This is the only way government does what they do. And you're right. There's no true competition. If you buy electricity from an EMC or whomever in your area, there's no real competition. Nobody's making juice anywhere else. They're just packaging, using the same lines. Same thing with phone services.
Exactly.
When people had it, they're using the same infrastructure. It's not like there's any actual competition.
Well, and this could get, I don't want to go down a huge rabbit hole, but the coal ash thing is definitely something that we've been paying attention to in South Georgia, because Georgia as a whole has become a dumping ground in landfills because the states and the EPA have ordered these power plants to dispose of, or properly and adequately dispose of, their coal ash, because they were just putting it in ponds and then it was not being taken care of or maintained. And so now they're taking it from ponds and transporting it to landfills. Well, the companies are the ones that they have to incur the cost of dumping it. So, like you said, the cost of being efficient or having a clean pond to take something to a dirty landfill is that you've got to transfer it and pay for it. And what's even worse on top of that is that our state of Georgia is actually incentivizing companies to transport it, to get rid of it, to turn coal, ash, and fly ash into different forms of energy. Like, they're giving them grants, incentivizing them, reducing costs on different things to make it more efficient for them to do this, yet they're still jacking up the prices across the board. Right. I understand that the cost of doing business is going to go up regardless of what we do. Like, that's just life. But I have a much more difficult time when I'm watching the government manipulate, like, all the, I guess, different legs of this, because it's not just your lights. Like, what Georgia Power does and what Southern Company does on a daily basis goes well beyond just your light bulbs, and all of these things that branch off, the cost for them is going down as the government tries to get them to do something, and it's going up for everybody else.
Oh, sure. It's anything government touches. Now, before we get off this subject, the Atlanta Gas Light is looking to approve a $96 million rate increase, which would be about $45 a year per customer. Again, this is something that it doesn't matter if you buy from SCANA or whomever. These are both Southern companies, by the way. They're owned by the same people. The rate increase is there, and this is the same thing. When you used to heat your house, your typical furnace was about 60% efficient, which means 40% of what the heat that you produce goes up the flue pipe. And now they're up to 98% efficient, which means of every dollar you spend to heat your house, 98 cents stays in your house and you only lose 2 pennies. So with that, of course, you consume a lot less. And Atlantic Gas Light still has the same infrastructure, still has everything they've got to do to operate, and we're using less. So the answer to that is not more competition or leaning up. It's to charge more. And natural gas is one of the cheapest forms of energy to get. It's widely available. So it's not like we're not burning petroleum. It's not propane. There's no the cost of getting it is relatively low in comparison to other fossil fuels, such as coal or oil. So
it's a racket.
Of course it is. That's it. Go off the grid.
Yeah. Yep.
Of course, if you go off the grid, they come out and serve you with a warrant for not hooking into the utilities.
That's right.
Go get myself a double wide and put a bunch of solar panels around it, and when it's rainy, sleep.
Sounds wonderful.
After all the Jon Stewart stuff and TV appearances and the just gentleman who just died, the 9/11 Victim Fund finally passes the Senate 97-2. So who voted against it? Who were the two? Rand Paul and Mike Lee, Kentucky and Utah, respectively.
So when I see their names on something, whether it's if they voted for it or they voted against it, like they're two of my go-to people on what's going on. If I want to know, and they're usually pretty good about voting or explaining why they vote away, whether it's in, the way their supporters think they should or not. So they're my go-to people. And 99 times out of 100, I feel like I'm on the same page with them when they have an unpopular reason for voting no. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
And this is something, especially after all the publicity that came from it, I feel like this is one of those things that it's like cringeworthy. Like it almost causes you pain to read that they did this, but it's the definition of political courage, because it is a principled reason to vote no on something that probably most of the country supports.
Right. And it's not that they don't support the bill. This is what gets lost is nuance. It's not that they don't support the first responders. Here we go. While I support our heroic first responders, I can't in good conscience vote for legislation which, to my dismay, remains unfunded. We have a nearly $1 trillion deficit and $22 trillion in debt. Spending's out of control. And I think their points are, we don't have a problem doing this, and we should. It's our obligation, but we need to cut something else. And I just think they're going to find themselves on the wrong side of history on this one. It's just not the hill I would die on as a fiscal conservative.
I agree with it, but I agree with what you're saying.
What they wanted to do, and I appreciate what they wanted to do, which was fund it. It was cut something else. Is take that money, move it from this area over to the 9/11 Victims Fund, and not essentially keep borrowing money to do this. And I totally support that concept. But man, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to do that. And maybe that means I wouldn't be as principled a lawmaker as they are, because they're sticking to the principles. I mean, they're going to take their slings and arrows on this one.
They are, and it's going to come up in the next election cycle, and this one will be one of those that will be twisted and make them look terrible. But they do, they have a consistency And there would have been a lot of not nearly as many people, but their core supporters and the people that they try to really, the people that they represent would have been disappointed if they would have, gone the other way.
I don't know. The images are so damning. And when I talk about the images, it's everything that we witnessed on September 11th, 2001. The images of first responders covered in this combination of soot and everything else was just in the air. And you have these images of police officers carrying children out, and you have the images of the planes flying in, and then you have these firefighters and people searching for bodies, and you have W standing on top of a fire truck covered in rubble and speaking on his bullhorn, and then you fast forward 20 years and you see this emaciated man who's at the end of his life, who knows he's at the end of his life, testifying before Congress, and you see that the direct result of what he was doing, especially after being told it was safe. It's. I understand the politics of this are bad, and I can't. Even amongst my more libertarian friends, I don't know anybody's like, no, we should use them as a political football in order to advance our conservative financial nature. Man, that they're not the football to be used.
But what happens when, they're correct that there's no funding mechanism in place. What happens when a few years down the road, there's no money and they say, but you voted to approve this?
No, I agree.
Who's going to be to blame then? Who will be held responsible?
Well, what government doesn't do, and that you and I have to do in our lives, is prioritize a budget. And when you're prioritizing your budget, there's stuff at the bottom that isn't going to happen. What's on the top? Keep my house, keep the lights on, and then you work your way down to, well, I guess I'm not taking a vacation this year. So the government doesn't have to do that. They just fund and just keep borrowing. So that's who will be to blame? Everyone will be to blame at that point for not prioritizing their budgets. For not saying, you know what, these 500 expenditures at the bottom of the list, we've got to cut these out because there's no way we can budget. We can balance our budget. There's no appetite to balance the budget. It sounds really good when you campaign. I don't foresee it in my lifetime.
For sure. David Perdue's been there for almost 5 years, basically. And that's what he campaigned on, was fiscal responsibility, fiscal reform, blah, 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 blah. He's still sending out the same press releases saying that's his top priority. He's the only Fortune 500 CEO in Congress and blah, 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 blah. Yet, here we are 5 years later, nothing's changed, there's been no progress. He voted for something like this, which I'm not condemning him for doing it, but it's just the reality of the way that our government is working. It's not happening. We're just piling on, and the people who are cautious about piling on are the villains, and, they make the case that everything we do is a good cause. Every government expenditure is a good cause.
Right. There's always somebody to put out there. Right. This, and like I said, the images on this one are going to be tough. It's going to be tough to overcome. They both come from very patriotic states. Now it'd be worse if it came from New York. Just because I'll say more sensitive an issue. I don't know how much more sensitive an issue it can be for anybody, but the folks that watched it happen, who have a brother who was there at Ground Zero, they know people who died in the towers. That, of course, that would be political suicide, and it may be for them. And if that's the hill they die on, I respect the decision to do it. I'm just not sure that's the right, of all the expenditures to go after, I'm not sure this is the one.
Right.
Especially after voting for tax cuts. Yeah, man, it's someone's going to go after him on it. There's somebody especially on the Republican side in Kentucky who's rubbing his hands together, who is already drawing up campaign art of Rand Paul turning his back on the towers. I mean, at least that's what I'd be doing if I was a campaign staffer. I would tie this albatross around his neck and make sure that everywhere I went, I brought it up.
For sure. I mean, they teed it up perfect for any opponent, but the best thing they could do is continually vote against stuff for, the next year and just show a consistency. No, it's not going to take away those negative mailers, but at least illustrate that it's not for anybody paying attention, it will.
Right.
I mean, really quick, I know we need to move on, but Matt Gertler voted against the firefighter insurance, I think it was 2 years ago, for the coverage for cancer in Georgia. He was the only one, and they blistered him on it, but he had a principled reason for doing it. He got reelected.
Oh yeah, and I don't know when Paul is up. I don't know how much time he has before he has to run again. But time will settle some of it, and it's one of those things where it was a lot easier taking a principled stand when you know it's going to pass anyway, and there's really no harm. If he was vote 51 to pass it, and then he voted against it, that's something different. So since it passed, and same thing with the firefighters fund. I think the same thing. They got what they wanted, and a politician was able to go back to say, "Look, I'm the only fiscal conservative up there. I'm the only one looking out for your wallet." So I think it is a lot easier to be the fiscal hawk when you know it's going to pass anyway.
It's probably sometimes fair.
So lawsuit says Georgia makes Puerto Ricans answer questions about frogs and plantains to get a driver's license. Wow.
When this story came out, obviously it came out, I think it was first in the AJC and then a bunch of Georgia-based media outlets. And so the headlines were kind of inflammatory, as the media usually does. And so I was hesitant. I mean, I actually did read the articles before forming an opinion. And once you get past the introduction, I think it's just a series of what? Are you serious? Oh my God. It's hard to comprehend that somebody thought this was okay.
Right. And Puerto Rico is a territory. If you want to move here from another country, you need a green card. To move here from Puerto Rico, you either need an airplane ticket. That's it. You're already an American. You're already a citizen. Puerto Ricans have a National Guard. They freely enlist in the Army. There are some cultural differences, which we'll get to a little bit later. Just, kind of the way that island developed. But, man, the stuff as I was reading this article, and I was like you, I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. There's no way they're asking about plantains and frogs.
So, I think we should back up.
Okay.
Did you mention that Georgia, there's no reciprocity for their licenses?
No, I have not yet. Yes.
Which I think is odd. I mean, every other... do you agree with that? I don't think I do.
No. There has to be a reason. Look, if you move here from any of the 50 states, or from the District of Columbia, you have reciprocity. You go and you get yourself a Georgia license. It's almost as if whoever was in charge of the DMV coming up with these rules was like, well, we got to figure out how to separate these Spanish-speaking people from these Spanish-speaking people. So,
and
okay.
I really want to know. I mean, I know that it's not as important as resolving this, and because it's now a class, they're asking for it to be made a class action suit. But I want to know who did this, when it was put in place. I mean, it wasn't anybody in the Kemp administration because, and we're really jumping around here, but one of the people who was behind the lawsuit, he's been waiting for his license for 600 days. So this has been like an ongoing process. I think when they filed the lawsuit, there were 30 or 40 people that have been impacted by this, but I would imagine that that number has just multiplied with the story coming out, because I think there's like 80,000 Puerto Ricans that live in Georgia.
I think the number I read was 96,000, but we're splitting hair. I'm splitting hairs on that one. What bothers me and is the questions, the verifying that you're the right kind of Spanish speaker is what's bothering me. The reciprocity doesn't even bother me as much because perhaps Puerto Rico is not part of the state agreement for driver's licenses.
Well, no, and you're right, but it just seems it seems inconsistent, and the fact that there is no reciprocity is why they're in this position. So that was why I was pointing it out more or less. But you're right. I mean, the questions are what's alarming. Do you want to read 6 of the questions?
How long is the San Juan Fajardo train ride? Answer: there is no train. Who is Roberto Clemente? He's a baseball player. Baseball has been very, very good to me. What is the name of the frog native only to Puerto Rico? I'm not going to try to pronounce it. Coqui? Qui? I just did try. What is a pava? Which is a hat. What kind
of hat? What kind of hat?
It's a hat worn by small farmers or hillbillies.
That is their answer at the DMV. They have that answer. I mean, that's what? I mean, what if you say just a hat? Is that not sufficient?
Right. We have a question about a meat-filled plantain. Mm-hmm. How do you celebrate San Juan Day? Walk backwards into the ocean at midnight? I mean, dear God, man.
And this was an interesting, a spokeswoman from the Department of Driver Services, in this, of course, a number of places filed open records requests asking for their policies, and technically they don't have to release the quiz questions, or they don't have to release all of them because the state shields any testing materials. So well, I'm not going to get into it, but they don't have to release this because you could be asking for it so you could prepare for it. But they did confirm that those were among the questions, and then said that it's not an authorized DDS document, meaning the questions that the document that these questions appear on is not an authorized document. So somebody somewhere was acting outside their purview when this all began, or DDS is now just trying to distance themselves from what's going to be a massive racial scandal.
And, I'm not even sure if it's race-based. Here's the thing. I think this was somebody's idea to, it could have been a native Puerto Rican up there and say, well, how do we make sure that they're actually from Puerto Rico? They're not just claiming it. Well, there's no way anybody from Mexico would know what, the name, the frog, the coqui. There's no way anybody from Mexico would know that's only in Puerto Rico. most likely a Mexican wouldn't know that there's no train. It's stupid. But they have you have a birth certificate from a U.S. territory. You have a driver's license from a U.S. territory. I don't know the genesis of this, and like I said, I don't even care about the reciprocity as much as the hoops to jump through to get a driver's license. And
none of us could answer similar questions like this about our state or probably even the U.S. I mean, heck, there's a huge percentage of Americans who couldn't pass the citizenship test. And you're talking about a driver's license for people who are here legally. It was stupid. I don't know who did it, but it was stupid.
Yeah, it was. And I don't even understand if you fail the questions.
How many questions can you fail?
Right. How long's the train? I have no idea.
Well, and I know it's more of a procedural political move than anything, but Kemp asked the department to conduct their own internal investigation, which usually ends up with, we conducted our internal investigation and found that there was no wrongdoing.
Wait, this is the same guy that just said that no department can conduct their internal investigation when it comes to sexual harassment.
That's right.
Because they can't be trusted to do their own. It has to go to the IG.
That's right. But, this story broke, and this same day, Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight group was already putting out statements, and they were fundraising off of this and trying to make it a Republican thing. And, again, we still don't know when this was put into place. It's been going on for at least a couple of years. But I'd like to remind her that if this guy's been waiting on it for 600 years, or 600 days, probably feels like 600 years if you don't have a license, but she was in office, and all these policies that she opposes, she was there for, helped implement on the legislative side, and was not fielding. People have been complaining about this for years, so all of a sudden it's a Republican thing and something they're going to fundraise off of, which it's wrong, and I'm not going to support it, but I also don't support sending out a press release about the Department of Driver Services and then saying, under scrutiny for voter suppression, Brian Kemp, is implying that Puerto Ricans aren't Americans.
Well, she's right about one thing. It is effectively voter suppression. Now, I don't think that was the genesis of it. But if you can't get a driver's license, how are you going to vote? You're already American, but you have the right to vote.
Yeah, but she didn't even say that it's voter suppression. She said that while we're under scrutiny for voter suppression, Brian Kemp is also doing this. Yeah, she's missing her mark on it, other than she's talking to her base who already hates Kemp. Yeah.
Already believes that the election was stolen, and she's doing the same thing as what's her name in Cobb County. Is she's taking something and she's making political hay out of it and lining her coffers. And Abrams is going to run for something.
Yeah, and her group has raised a substantial amount of money. I think they were at like $1.5 million at the last reporting period, which will just funnel money back to her and other candidates, or maybe just fuel a bunch of lawsuits. But how do you make this right at this point? Because the worst part about investigations and lawsuits and all of this is they take time. So what is the immediate remedy? That's what Kemp, in my opinion, should have done, was say, I am ordering this process to cease immediately.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now that this has been brought to my attention, stop it.
And I would just like to take this time to remind everyone that this lawsuit was filed in federal court because Kemp vetoed the sovereign immunity legislation, which would have allowed people to sue over unconstitutional laws and regulations at the state level for injunction. But they can't because he vetoed it because of the heartbeat bill. So you can't sue your government unless they give you permission to sue. So they have to go through the federal courts, which take longer, is more expensive. It's harder to follow in the public eye. Whole other slew of problems. But I think he could have done more, like, off the bat to at least provide, until the investigation is complete, until we know what's going on. Like, let's not do this. I'm ordering you not to do this test.
And there are accusations that Georgia officials are seizing Puerto Rican driver's licenses, birth certificates, and Social Security cards without explanation. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what this is actually. I'm reading this off of the statement from the Puerto Rican governor, which, yeah,
his credibility has in recent days plummeted.
So that is something that I'd like to find out. Are we seizing documents? I mean, Puerto Ricans have Social Security cards. They have a driver's license that's issued from a U.S. territory. They have a birth certificate that's issued from a U.S. territory. That's not like they're just, not like people are just showing up with no documentation. Somehow they got on the damn airplane.
Right. It's disappointing, and I feel bad for everybody who's impacted by this, mostly because it's all going to be slowed down by bureaucracy. And
it all it does is feed the current BS, the racial tensions that Republicans hate brown people. They hate people who speak Spanish. And it's just going to be a political football for them. And it's obviously not a Kemp thing, but you're right. A lot of times it's not the scandal, it's how you react to it. And what he should have said is, get rid of the test. Now.
Right.
And he has the authority to do that.
He does.
Well, speaking of Puerto Rico, last week we get the news that the Puerto Rican governor, sounds like a slur if I say Puerto Rican governor, the Puerto Rican governor will be stepping down August 2nd. Over a scandal involving, amongst other things, up to 900 pages of text messages, ranging from homosexual epithets and slurs to jokes about the dead after Hurricane Maria.
We were talking before the show about how quickly this all transpired. I mean, this has all been... this scandal started, I think the texts were released on July 8th. And on in the middle of the night, basically, on the 24th, 25th, he resigned. That's a very quick time.
It is. And not to glaze over the fact that they did an investigation. In less than a month, they were ready to move forward with impeachment because there was something there. There was smoke and there was fire. This, no dotted lines, no 2.5-year investigation. They went in, they looked, say, you know what, we've got evidence of corruption, and we can remove him from office. Let's move forward with impeachment. And I think that's really what eventually got Rosselló to resign. The quote on Ricky Martin is, all right, nothing says patriarchal oppression like Ricky Martin. He is such a male chauvinist that he F's men because women don't measure up. And the press is calling that a slur. I really don't think that's a slur.
And I don't think he meant it as I
don't think so either. And of course, this is probably translated from Spanish. And we know anybody who speaks Spanish can't possibly be American.
According to the Georgia Department of Driver Services.
Exactly. Does he know what kind of frog it is? Rosselló is a member of the ruling class. When I said earlier, there's a different culture in Puerto Rico. There really is a ruling class down there. And I know there is here, arguably, but his father was a 2-term governor. He grew up very, very privileged. Attended MIT, attended University of Michigan. So he's going to be fine. But he's a member of the ruling class. So there's a very much a feeling as you go through these text messages of looking down their nose at the people. And this almost reminds you of the Zorro stories of the Dons controlling the people and looking down upon the peasants. Because that's really kind of his attitude, making jokes about all the dead, is looking down their nose is almost let them eat cake.
Well, and I know you touched on it, but the fraud side of this and the federal funding issue is pretty huge. And you mentioned a constitutional crisis from the standpoint of, I mean, maybe that's why his resignation is not effective immediately, that they need time to organize.
They do. The second in command would be the Secretary of State. That office is vacant through the same scandal. So it's going to come down to the Secretary of Justice. And I guarantee you, this person never thought she'd be going to the governor's mansion, especially in this manner.
Is that office, and I'm acting like you're some sort of expert on Puerto Rico, but is that appointed, or is that like an attorney general that is elected? It sounds like some designated survivors type stuff where like a person who...
It is appointed.
Interesting.
You're nominated by the governor and appointed by the governor.
Yeah, so you're talking about totally inept. And I don't mean that as a slam, but I mean inept from an executive position. However, when these types of things happen, you often have a lot of help and oversight from like watchdogs, and the federal government usually will step in and have serious monitoring, because I think it was $15.5 million allegedly misused in the last 2 years.
Well, and I will say on the Secretary of Attorney General, essentially, she is not one of the cool kids because she wasn't in on the chat. She was left out of all the awesome jokes that he had. So obviously she's the designated survivor because she's not the cool kid. But the corruption down there. Now, look, this is nothing new. Anybody who operates businesses down in Puerto Rico has a line item in their budget for theft. It's just the way it's done. Now, I'm not excusing it. I'm not excusing it, especially when it comes to government money. But there's a cavalier attitude when it comes to that stuff. In fact, more people were upset about the bad jokes than they were about the fraud. They were upset about making fun of Hurricane Maria, which devastated the island. They were more upset about the bad jokes and making fun of Ricky Martin than they were about the fraud, because that's what made the news, is the text, and not the fraud. And that's,
yeah.
If it was just fraud, if it was just skimming off the top of the money that was coming down there wouldn't be thousands of people in the streets getting tear gassed. It'd have been That's
a very good point.
That's what they do.
That's a very good point. It is not always. It is more often than not not personal, because this was in his official capacity, but for lack of a better word, the personal side of things that tank people.
Right. Now, let me say, there are many elected officials across this country that are taking a collective dump in their shorts, because most that I know have private chats, and they share jokes that they certainly would not want exposed to the general public. And most people do. Most people will have a private laugh, but the advent of text messaging with that stuff has used to have to be on a hot mic, and you don't have to anymore. All somebody has to do is not be upset and leak it. Leak one of your bad jokes to the press. So yeah, that was the thread they started picking. And once you start picking at threads, you can't control where it pulls from. And it went straight up to corruption on them. And that's when they started looking at impeachment. They can't impeach him for making a bad joke about Ricky Martin, but they can for theft. And they were ready to move now, which means the evidence was damning and obvious.
I wonder how quickly, as quickly as everything else has transpired in such a short window that this all kind of started happening. I wonder how quickly this will go down in the legal system.
And I don't know if it will. Once he's out of office, there may be some underlings that take the fall. I don't know if he will or not. He obviously can afford an attorney, unless the federal government gets involved, and which they might. I don't know that the criminal justice system will go after him with that. I just don't know. I have no idea. By the time this podcast drops, he may be in an orange jumpsuit.
Right. I definitely think the people who were already arrested will just start talking.
And what you may see is the U.S. attorney get involved, and it will be a very deliberate, very measured investigation where he's walking free, and then one day he'll get asked to come turn himself in, and at that point it'll be a all but a lock. I think the federal government may get involved in this one.
I hope. I mean, $15 million in federal funding is a big deal.
I don't care if it's $15. Theft is theft. But I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, that's it.
But it's a note. It's not something that it's not enough. I mean, we waste money all the time at the federal level. It's enough to say, oh wow, maybe we should look into this, because it's usually not just an isolated incident.
Yeah, and it wasn't enough on the budget by itself to be apparent. Had somebody not pulled that thread, there's no way that anyone would have missed it. And that's a scary thing too. Is it just on a budget that big, on a project that big, it's almost that you expect some of the cream to spill. And that's a sad thing in and of itself, that integrity wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a thought. Like, no, we're going to do this the right ways. No, how can I take care of my friends?
Well, and we don't know everything in the 889 pages. I mean, maybe you do. I haven't had time to read them all. But if there's any semblance of like joking about any of this, they're really in for it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, everybody who was on that text thread can just shred their any political ambition. They're not going to be appointed to anything. It's done. Because anybody who mentions their name, they're just going to start polling random texts. And look, here's the funny thing is he's in the Progressive Party. A lot of the jokes on that thread were about Trump. Mm-hmm. So this is not a left-right thing. He said a lot of mean things about the mayor of San Juan, which I agree with most of them. She is a scumbag. But, then again, most politicians are.
Amen.
But they're going to get him on being homophobic. They're going to get him on being a misogynist. There's just anybody who's on that thread is done. Is done. All right, now we beat Puerto Rico to death. I feel like Hurricane Maria all over again.
No one's dead, though.
No, I don't know. After listening to us for an hour, there may be somebody hanging in their shower.
Other than his political career.
Jessica, what do you have for closing thoughts?
I just want to take 45 seconds and make a consumer complaint. FedEx the incompetency is just, I hate them. We're a UPS community. We have a UPS facility in our, not far from my house. There's no FedEx. There's just like a FedEx drop-off point. People down here don't like FedEx. And apparently FedEx doesn't like us. Because I have complained about the GBI and this open records request that I have been asking for almost 2 months. We're like a day or so from 2 months. Finally got them to overnight it to me. And they FedExed it to me. And FedEx never came to my door. They never pulled in my driveway. And they sent it back to Atlanta saying I refused it. So the GBI called me and was like, hey, can you verify your address? I verified my address. They're like, that's what we sent it to. We'll send it again. They sent it again. I was home all day. I sit in front of the window at my computer. No one pulled in the driveway. No one came to my door. I put a sign on my door that said, do not send this back to Atlanta. I will knock on the door, leave a tracking number, do something. They've not left any notice. They've not contacted me, and they send it back to Atlanta again. And I think I'm almost, it's not just a private party. They're wasting tax dollars because the taxpayers are paying for it to be FedExed to me twice now. And I still don't have my records, and it's all FedEx's fault now. And I just want everyone to join with me in opposing not only their color scheme, but their business practices.
There are lots of stories like that. As we use more and more shipping, I've got a friend of mine who lives kind of out in the country, and he operates a gun business, so he gets stuff FedExed to him all the time. And because I guess he's got a long driveway, and you can't necessarily see the house from the road, they'll just turn around.
It's obnoxious.
They'll just turn around and say no one is available or refuse delivery. They've thrown, and I'm not sure if it was FedEx, but there's when you're in the gun business, you can get guns shipped to you. It'll say signature required and leave it outside the office. Nice. You just dropped off a gun and just left it outside. Anybody grab that package? So yeah, okay. I will reiterate: 3.5% unemployment. Good employees are hard to find, and anybody who shows up most days for work is hard to fire. I got two. First, I just saw, because the TV is on in the background mute, there's a child at the Atlanta airport, looks to be toddler size, that got caught on the luggage belt and had to be rescued. I mean, got pinned between a bag and was about to go through a sorter, had to be picked up. If you can't watch your kid, put him on a leash. I mean, that's how you keep gorilla enclosures toddler free, is keeping your kid on a leash. And I've got a great picture of my nephews with us at the baseball game, and we've got the leashes on them, and they're tied up to the rail. Now that sounds mean, but they didn't fall off, and they didn't get picked up. They didn't get stolen from us, and they didn't fall off the rail or anything else. I mean, you want to talk about old technology. You put a rope on them. So POTUS goes full Matt Lowe last week, trolling the left with Trump-branded plastic straws. That, to me, is hilarious. And he's probably going to raise $1 million doing it. And I don't know whose idea it was, if it was him or whoever, but everybody's been going after plastic straws and trying to get people to use these really crappy paper ones, or a permanent straw that you have to get a special brush to clean out, which is kind of gross. So to just, I mean, it really is. He is the troller in chief at this point, and some of it's just hilarious. And all I could think was Matt Lowe with that.
May his podcast memory rest in peace.
I heard that he left us to go work on the Trump campaign because he's decided that government's really, really good, and he wants to make sure that Trump gets the suppressors, the silencers banned. That's what I heard about him.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Actually,
he was given his opinion on public lands.
Exactly.
He loves government.
Actually, somebody commented on one of our pages. What happened to? Why is Matt's picture not gone? I was going to say that Matt left the show because he had to go into rehab.
He's a recovering government lover.
He's a recovering from love. I like it.
We're praying for you, Matt.
All right, so for Jessica Szilagyi, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.